we will be doing tie-dye and also basic sewing. So AfroWomen and Youth Foundation is a non-profit organization, and we support women, Black women and youth. And we're focusing on 3 major areas: leadership development, empowerment, and mentorship. So we're happy to have you one more time. Thank you for coming today, and we hope you have a good time. I'm going to pass it over to Titi now to lead us in the young and gig workers' rights. She's going to be talking about understanding new and old legislative changes. If you have any questions, just raise your hands and Titi will be sure to answer you. Thank you.
There's some people outside by the side door. So thank you guys for coming. We're going to be talking about gig workers' rights and a little bit about health and safety in the workplace. More chairs. So sorry about that little delay there, guys. What we're going to be talking about today is health and safety in the workplace more specifically. So you guys were not, most of you guys weren't here last week, but what we talked to, for those of you who were, a little refresher is we talked about the ESA in the workplace. So that talks about the Employee Standards Act. What are the bare minimums that employers have to give you in order to actually employ you in their workplace? So we talked a little bit about that and some of the new amendments that have been happening too, especially with digital platform workers. So if, let's say you take up gig work, so you take a job that has an app-based work, there are new amendments that had come out. And we talked a little bit about those protections that are in place for workers. So, as Adebola was up here earlier, she was talking a little bit about what this whole event is, Crafts for Mental Health and why we're here. It's a partnership program between us and the AfroWomen Youth Foundation, along with other organizations in Sudbury. So we're so grateful to have this opportunity to teach youth and to really interact with you guys and to have this opportunity to engage and learn about new rights in the workplace. So to get it started out here, a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are the Sudbury Workers Education and Advocacy Center. And what we do here is we help workers, of course, stay aware about their rights in the workplace as much as we can. So we do that through educational workshops. As you can see here, what we're doing today, we try to do it online as much as we can and in person.
If we're talking about health and safety, make sure you don't hit anybody.
What we do is we help keep workers aware about their rights in the workplace. So different workshops we do with workers that are all free. We also help workers one-on-one. So that means stay more aware. Sorry for that delay there, but as we get back on the road, guys, I hope everybody now is seated okay. I think we all have to see that.
I think everyone's okay now.
Okay. So now let's keep it going. And then what else that we do is we work one-on-one with workers and then we advocate for workers. So as you guys are going to see today, there's a lot of advocacy that I'm going to ask you guys to take for those of you who have phones and are old enough to have phones. I know there are some older youth in here today. The younger ones, you're just going to shout as loud as you can, and we're going to think about this for when we get older, okay? Yes. So next, oh, sorry, not next slide, next slide. Before we start off as well, we're going to do a quick land acknowledgement. Just to acknowledge that we are on the Robertson Huron Treaty territory and that we are also on the Anishnaabeg people, specifically the state territory of the Atikameksheng and Wahnapitae First Nations, as well as the Métis people. And the reason that we want to make sure that we're doing this land acknowledgement is not only to bring awareness to our Indigenous brothers and sisters, the struggle that is going on right now, the fight for reconciliation, the concern that we need to call our attention or to call our government to attention. There's many reasons that we need to make sure that we're doing this land acknowledgement, but also to honor the land that we're actually on, to acknowledge the fact that we are settlers in this position and that there are those who are native and those who are who have honored this ground before us. So we want to make sure that we're doing that acknowledgement for each and every one of us. So just quickly there. And then before we get into the fun part of this presentation today, reprisals are illegal. So if you ask you know, your employer about your rights in the workplace, they can't just punish you as a result of it. They have to actually, you know, work with you to make sure that whatever it is that you have an issue with is worked out. They can't punish you. They can't say, oh, I don't like the fact that you complained, and then all of a sudden, you know, give you attitude, change your shifts. Maybe they all of a sudden take your paycheck. That's a big shock if they just did that for no reason, just because you said, hey, can I have more rights in the workplace? They can't do that. It's illegal, and you have rights to protect you if that ever happens to you. So you're not alone if you're in that situation. Of course, some of you might be too young to start thinking about work, but you can still start thinking about protecting yourself if you're in this situation. But you need to make sure you're more aware of your rights in the workplace. As we keep going, for those of you who are starting jobs, signing a contract, you might have to sign a little letter that says, yes, you're going to do this job. Maybe you're going to go pick up a newspaper route. You might have to sign some agreement that says, yes, you're going to deliver the newspapers constantly on a certain time. And if you do that, you might get a certain payment or a pay from, you know, whoever it is that you're asking from. So from your neighbors or from the delivery carrier. I know some newspapers are set differently. Not all areas of work are going to concern or going to take on to signing a contract. Some places are going to force you to do it, some places won't. But it's important that if you ever do get a little piece of paper before you start to do a piece of job, you take it home and you sign, or you have somebody else look at it. You ask your mom, your parents, your older sister, siblings, whoever it is that you have around. You say, hey, can you take a look at this for me? Is this the best, you know, regulations? Are these the bare minimums that I should be signing up for? Is my employer trying to trick me out of anything that I should be aware of? So take it home, have somebody else take a look at it. It is completely free and you're allowed to do that. Your employer can't say, no, you have to sign it right now or you're not getting the job. They can't tell you that. You can just, you say, well, I don't want the job anyways, but they can't tell you that. That job is still technically yours as it was before you walked in the door. So you can still have that contract, take it home, have somebody else look at it. Someone else can take changes to it, say, hey, I don't agree to this, this, and this, and you can have a conversation with your employer. And then, of course, a lot of what we're going to do today is take action. Laws don't just spontaneously spring into action or spring into being. We are the ones that act to activate them or to bring them into action. Sorry. We encourage our decision makers, our lawmakers to actually make change, and we organize in order to do that. We have so many actions here at the Sudbury Worker Center that we'd love for you guys to take action in. I'm open to any ages. So if you are young and you want to start making noise, you can do that. Next Monday, we have a lot of actions here. If you come back here next Monday, we have actions. And the Monday after that, we have next action, more actions coming up. And of course, you guys are aware that we are here every Saturday. So lots and lots to do and lots of ways to make change and to change the laws that are around us. So how are workers' rights actually protected in the workplace? And then, of course, I talked a little bit about what we talked about last week. If you were here for the ESA presentation, that talked a little bit more about the bare minimums in the workplace. It was a little bit more boring, but it had some very important stuff in there about standards, things like minimum wages, things that your employer has to give you in order for them to be able to employ you. Today, we're going to talk about health and safety. So we're going to go into the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we're going to talk about things that your employer has to do to make sure things are safe in the workplace, so that way you can continue to work there. These are things that you also have to do as a worker in the workplace. These are things that you take on, that you say that you as a promise that you're going to do for yourself to keep yourself protected and keep others protected. And then, of course, we talk a little bit about gig workers' rights. We're not going to do too much of that today, but we will highlight a little bit of the amendments and then some action for you guys. And then our last presentation that we had was going to talk about human rights and a lot more action for you guys. So, of course, we're going to get part 2 today, workplace safety and protecting yourself in the workplace, which is a lovely, lovely area. And we're going to look at the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So this piece of legislation is what actually helps set up the protections in the workplace. For those of you who are very young, you may not be aware or ever seen anything like this before, but this comes into a little green book. And if you look over to the right side of our room over here, there's a little green book on the billboard. That is called your Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act. It should be in every single workplace that you go into, that you're going to start a job into, whatever it is, that should be there and you should be aware of it. You should also see on your little table there, a little book that says health and safety or your right to work and knowing health and safety in the workplace. I encourage you to go home, dig through this, learn this like it's the Bible, learn this like it's so cool for you, okay? Because this is so cool. This is the best thing in the workplace and it's going to help you protect yourself in the workplace and help you be aware of your rights. It's also going to help you know what to do in case you ever have a situation where you're experiencing unsafe situations or harassment and violence in the workplace. So we're going to go dig into the Occupational Health and Safety Act a little bit further and actually understand what it does for you and what it sets up. Before I go too far past, it also sets up 3 rights that you have in the workplace. So this is your right to know things. So that means you have a right to be informed about information, about things like the Green Book, about things like that little paper that we just gave you, any kind of things that are in your workplace that are there to keep you safe. You have a right to be informed about them. You also have a right to participate. So that means you have a right to take action, participate in committees, to participate in, saying, hey, this is unsafe, to make requests, whatever it is, you have a right to do that. You also have a right to refuse unsafe work. So if you have a situation where the work is very, very dangerous and you know that you're not trained for that, you can say, no, I'm not going to do this. That is your right. There are some jobs that you are not allowed to refuse safe work or to refuse some type of work. Those are very particular areas of job. And if you go into those job areas, you will know, for example, police, working as an ambulance or paramedic and so on, or firefighter. We will go into the depths of this lovely presentation today. So the first thing that you should know about are your rights of workers, health and safety in the workplace is the IRS. This is the Internal Responsibility System. It's a big, long sentence for who's in charge of making sure people are safe in the workplace. Essentially, everybody's in charge. Every single person is in charge. That means you are in charge of making sure people are safe in the workplace too. Some of your responsibilities as a worker would be simple things like reporting hazards. So if you see something, say something, things like that. Maybe you have to, in fact, refuse unsafe work. Little things like that. Maybe you help to say, hey, these policies aren't protective enough, or they aren't good enough. They aren't actually safe enough, or maybe we need a committee in our workplace. Little things like that are completely up to you, and you are allowed to participate and do that. And they are partly your job to do that. Things like wearing the proper PPE. Does anybody know what PPE means? I see hands, yes. Personal protective equipment, yes. Does anybody know what kind of PPE or what it would look like? Yes. There are many different types. And 95 masks, different shoes. Does anybody tell me a type of shoe that you might wear as a PPE?
Boots.
Boots, okay, what kind of boots? Okay, boots, yes, you might wear boots, you might wear hardcover boots, that way your toes are protected if you work in construction, or non-slip boots if you work into fast food, little things like that. Anybody else want to add something in there? Rubber boots, possibly. Hairnets is a big thing. If you work in fast food, you have to wear hairnets to keep everybody safe.
And
Goggles, glasses, goggles, very important. Also something you might be wearing if you work in any area of work. I worked in retail and I had to wear goggles for a little while. Now it's just as a result of COVID. Any more hands?
Gloves.
Gloves, yes. Beautiful things. You guys are so smart. Oh my God. Hats, hard hats, helmets you might have to wear. Many different things. Earphones, you might have to wear earplugs. There are a large list of different types of PPE that you have to wear, and there are going to be a different type of things for different scenarios, as my friend here said. It just depends on what your job is and where you're going to be applying them. Make sure that you're wearing them. Don't not wear it. It's not cool. I promise you. You'll lose a finger. You'll just be sad. You'll lose a limb, and then you'll have to be on WCIB. And I cannot explain to you how many workers have gone through more struggle going on to WCIB than just trying to keep themselves protected in the workplace. And of course, accidents happen all the time, but if you can avoid it, do whatever you can to not get injured at work. We beg you. This is to protect your lives, please. But this is, as we went through a nice fun discussion of what PPE is and how important it is. And I please encourage you guys to make sure you wear all those things that we just talked about: gloves, glasses, boots, jackets, whatever it is that you have to wear for that particular job, wear it, okay? Because there are so many different types of hazards in the workplace. There are biological hazards, physical hazards, chemical hazards, psychosocial hazards. And we're going to go through each one of these to actually examine how they might portray themselves into your workplace. Can anybody tell me some type of physical hazards that might portray themselves in the workplace? This is anything that might not necessarily touch you, but it can show up in the workplace. Oh. Yeah. What's the question? So what are types of physical hazards that might show up in the workplace? These are things that might not necessarily touch you. So anything can be physical.
A chainsaw.
A chain, yeah, okay. That's a physical thing that can show up in the workplace and hurt you if you're not using it properly. I have
It was like the thing that moves the patient after falling.
Oh, I could, yeah, I don't, so if you're working in a nurse care or healthcare, they have that bed lift that raises the patient up, and that can fall on you. The whole patient can fall on you, which can be incredibly terrifying. Of course, there are ways to make sure you're being protected in that, but that is a physical. I have a great example for you guys. If you're in your workplace, oh no! I just said it.
Oh, no one listens.
What, did you say it? Sorry, did you say it? Did you say it? You slip, you trip, that's it, exactly, you trip, you slip. These are physical things that might show up in your workplace. Fire, that's another one that we're gonna get into. So before, as she said, fire, that brings us into chemical things that might show up in your workplace. So you might have actual bigger situations, more radioactive things that are, sorry? One more time?
A chair.
A chair, that would be physical, but you have chemical things that are gonna have a reaction in the workplace. Things that we use every day, maybe it's like hand sanitizer. Maybe it's been eating away at your clothes. Maybe it's been eating away at your skin. Maybe it's been eating away at your nails. Does anybody wear nails? Oxygen? Yeah, oxygen. So that brings us into our next area of things that kind of go into the workplace. Biological hazards. If your oxygen starts to become a threat and it starts to become a danger in the workplace, you have to wear masks, you have to wear certain things to keep you protected. These are biological hazards that can cause you allergies, that can make you sick, that can make you poison, you can breathe them in, it can honestly start to kill you. Things like COVID-19, things like germs. I heard germs somewhere. Yeah, see? Little things like that can show themselves in the workplace and they can interact and they can affect you, making things very dangerous. They can cause different chain-like reactions that can affect you for long term. Psychosocial is our final one. Can anybody tell me what they feel like psychosocial would be?
Touching.
Touching? We did physical. Bullies, that's spot on. So psychosocial would have to do with things that are going to affect your mental health and mental status at work. Bullying would be exactly one of those areas that would affect you at work. work. Things that people say to you, things like different racism, bingo, microaggressions, things like that can definitely have an impact on you in the workplace and change your mental state, change how you feel about coming to work. That is a hazard at work, and that can create a dangerous situation for you. You no longer feel safe to comfortable going to work. There are ways and options for you to make sure that you are protected, to make sure that you don't feel alone, and make sure that you have a method so that way you can get those options and opportunities to get better, get those proper connections and those proper resources. But the important thing, is that there are many different hazards that can affect you in the workplace, from biological, physical, psychosocial. It's important to acknowledge that you might not always see these types of hazards. We might not always see these types of hazards in the workplace. Hello, 1, 2. We're all looking up. Okay. So let's keep going. I know it's very interesting, but as we continue through this lovely presentation, I know we want to get to the fun part, which is some tie-dye. So there are not all these hazards that might affect themselves in the workplace. You might not always see them as we're just going through. And the important thing to also remember is that they can affect you for short term, and they could also affect you for the long term. So some hazards might be very short term. I see you might have a boo-boo on your finger there. Is that just you being okay. No. So you might have to put a little Band-Aid on for a quicker cut, something that might simply happen in the workplace, or you might end up having to go to the hospital. It might be something that you have to get rushed out of the workplace for. Whatever it is, it's important that you're making sure that you're telling your employer that you got injured in the workplace, that something happened, that you're filing out the proper reports, and that, that you're filling out the proper reports and you're going about the proper processes to make sure you get connected to the proper resources. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But before we do, violence and harassment in the workplace, which is the other aspect of all these hazards. As she was talking about before, she said bullying is one aspect of the violence and harassment in the workplace. Racism, another aspect of the violence and harassment in the workplace that can affect you. This can be both physical and mental. It can look like a lot of things. It can be sexual assault. It can be very, very, very scary, or it can be something like somebody's just teasing you. Somebody is making it very uncomfortable for you to go to work. They just keeps calling you names. You know, they kept saying, "Hey, big head, hey, loser." That's not nice. Or they could be touching you. They might be touching you up, and it's not nice. Little things like that can really be hazards in the workplace that are affecting you and making it very hard for you to go to work. Violence and harassment, if it is affecting you in the workplace, it's important that you go about getting connected to the proper policies and the proper procedures. Every workplace has to have policies and procedures in order to deal with violence and harassment if it happens to you. And it's important to be acknowledged that if it doesn't count or if it does show up in your workplace, there are ways to go about dealing with that. It does have an effect on each person that it encounters in the workplace, not only you. It also affects the other workers in the workplace, the workplace itself, the business, and then your friends and family at home can also be affected by whatever it is that you experience. So it's important that if you're ever experiencing this, you reach out, you get connected to the proper resources. It can look like a wide range of things, as simple as bullying to as wide as of more serious concerns. So before we get into the work refusal, I just say let's all take 2 deep breaths. Take a nice good breath in. Everybody breathe in. And everybody breathe out. Okay. Do we all have seats?
No,
There's one there.
Oh.
She's very respectful.
You're out of seat. Whoa. He wants to stand.
Yes, you can move there. She wanted to move there before. I just sit down. Here. Who else needs a chair then?
There's one, yeah.
You need a chair?
You want to stand?
Come sit.
I will sit down. Take his chair as well.
I want your legs to break.
Hey, what? Everyone heard that.
I want your legs to break.
Oh.
I want your legs.
I don't know what's the legs on me. You can't say that out loud.
Okay, so sorry about that, guys. Okay, let's keep going. We're almost done, and then we're gonna have into the fun part as the room keeps growing. I know it's overwhelming, but this is so exciting. We have so much planned. Where's our artist today?
Me.
Are you ready for her?
Not yet. So yeah, take your time. Almost there. We're gonna fast forward through the rest of it. So it's important that if you ever experience an injury or you are injured or you have an illness at work, whatever it is, maybe you lose a finger, maybe you get a cut, like I was talking about before, you go through the processes of reporting it. There are systems called the W.S.W.E.A.C that are out there to make sure that if you ever have a serious injury at work that requires more than first aid, you have a way of getting compensation for that. So that way you don't have to be alone and you don't have to live the rest of your life injured. But of course, the reality is a lot of people do live their lives on the rest of these systems. So it's important that you just don't get injured at work. If you have to refuse unsafe work, there is a process to do so. So that way you don't have to actually go through it or you don't feel like you don't know what to do. If you ever have to say no to work, you can tell your employer no. There has to be an investigation that goes through. You have to be let known about the ending of the investigation. You also have to offer different alternative opportunities. So maybe there's a different alternative to work. So you don't have to do that direct job. You can do a different job. Okay, there's different ways that you can go about going about the work refusal process, but it's an option for you if you have to do it for any reason, sorry. And then I also have a couple things that for those of you who are a little bit older, if you are starting to think about a new job, or even if you're just starting to think about going to the work area sphere, volunteering, maybe you're thinking about getting involved with your friends in a little club, something like that. There are many ways that you can get injured. And then there are also many ways you can protect yourself. So you want to ask yourself, before you go into any of these things, what kind of equipment will you be using? What kind of equipment will you have to come interaction with? What kind of PPE will you need to use? Is there going to be kind of training? Are you going to get certain training that you have to get? Maybe there's some certification that you need for this job. Things like that, you want to make sure you ask yourself and you're getting done before you just step into it. Of course, then we also want to remember the acronym RACE, which is recognize the hazard, assess the situation, control the hazard, and eliminate it completely. PPE should never be used first. It's always as a backup option. If you can eliminate the hazard first, that should always be done. Always get support and help. Don't just go throw yourself into something alone. Okay, you're not a superhero. I know you are crazy strong and amazing, but it's better to get that support. It is much better to get the help so that way you don't end up injuring yourself and don't end up being hurt at work. And of course, never, ever take off your PPE. Please always wear it. Always wear it. If you have it, wear it. It is not cool to not wear it. You're just going to get injured. You look cool wearing it. I promise you that. And of course, if you ever have a situation where you have gone through an injury at work, violence and harassment, or something that you just need to make a complaint on health and safety at work, so things are not going up to par, and you have to say, hey, that's not right. I have to make a complaint. There are processes that are out there that you can do that. You can get connected with us here at the Sudbury Workers Center, or You can, of course, start documenting everything, and then you can go through the process of connecting to yourself to the Ministry of Labor, which is the next slide. Of course, make sure you're documenting, keep track of things, hold on to things that your employer gives you, things like the contract, things like any letters, any notes, any training, training certificates, completions, things like that that he said that you're supposed to do, or anything that you get in contact with. Make sure you keep track of, make sure you're writing things down for your own case, that way you can pull it back up in case you need it. And then, of course, you can make a complaint if you are experiencing any of those things, or if you're present, you can contact us or the Ministry of Labor. But for those of you who have a phone here today, I would love all of us to activate and get encouraged, because we're going to take an action. This summer, we have a great opportunity for full and permanent resident status for migrant workers. So for everybody who has a phone, take out your little photo taking app. Yes, yes. And then we're going to sign the petitions. That way we're going to encourage our decision makers to pull on full permanent residence for all workers. That way it is not a gamble of who gets the status. Each and every worker deserves to get this full permanent status. At the screen,